First contact under fire. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood at the helm of the UES Stormbreaker, her weathered hands resting on the ship's traditional steering column, a deliberate anachronism in an age of neural interfaces and thought-controlled navigation. The massive view screen before her displayed the aftermath of what could only be described as a massacre. Debris fields of sleek, crystalline ships scattered across the star-speckled void. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the grotesque tableau before them. Lieutenant Chen's fingers danced across his hybrid interface, part holographic display, part physical controls. 3 Gentai cruisers detected, heavily damaged. Their quantum communication arrays are offline, but we're picking up old-fashioned radio signals. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Rodriguez nodded. The Gentai were notorious for their pure digital approach to technology, their ships essentially floating supercomputers guided by artificial intelligence, so advanced it bordered on consciousness. To see them reduced to using radio was like watching an orchestra forced to communicate through Morse code. "Put them through, Lieutenant." The voice that filled the bridge crackled with static, another sign of how desperate the situation had become. "This is Admiral Venzar of the Gentai Defense Fleet. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself." "Admiral, this is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the United Earth ship Stormbreaker. We picked up scattered fragments of your distress call. What happened here?" There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of distant explosions transmitted through the radio link. When the Admiral spoke again, his artificial voice contained something Rodriguez had never heard in a Gentai communication. Fear. They came from the dark between the spiral arm and the void. Our sensors detected nothing until they were upon us. Their weapons. Another pause. "Captain, they didn't destroy our ships. They turned them off. Every quantum system, every digital network, every AI node just switched off as if someone had pulled a cosmic power plug. We lost 30 ships in the first wave, their crews trapped in vessels that became nothing more than metal coffins." Rodriguez exchanged glances with her XO, Commander Sarah Wells. The Gentai were centuries ahead of humanity in nearly every technological measure. Their quantum computers could process more data in a second than all of Earth's systems combined could in a year. Their AI networks were rumored to be able to predict the future with 99.9% accuracy. To hear them brought low so easily sent a chill through the bridge. "Admiral, we're picking up anomalous readings at the edge of our sensor range," Chen reported. "Multiple contacts, moving fast. Configuration unknown. They're coming back." Venzar's voice was resigned. "Captain Rodriguez, I appreciate your response to our distress call, but you should withdraw. Your vessel cannot hope to." "Admiral," Rodriguez interrupted, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "With all due respect, I think you'll find that human ships are a bit different from what you're used to. XO Wells, sound battle stations. Lieutenant Chen, power up the analog backup systems. Ensign Park, plot and intercept course, manual controls." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and Rodriguez felt the subtle shift as the Stormbreaker's systems transitioned. Unlike the Gentai ships, which relied entirely on quantum computing and AI, human vessels were a deliberate hodgepodge of technologies. Digital systems layered over analog backups, physical controls alongside neural interfaces, AI processors working in tandem with human brains. The Gentai had always viewed it as primitive, inefficient. Today, they might learn differently. "Contacts approaching," Chen reported. "I'm getting weird readings. Their energy signature is like nothing in our database. It's almost like they're not fully in our dimension." The view screen shifted, showing the approaching enemy fleet. The ships were wrong in a way that hurt to look at. Geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves, surfaces that absorbed light rather than reflected it. As Rodriguez watched, one of the alien vessels fired a beam of something at a drifting piece of Gentai debris. The crystalline metal simply went dark, all its internal systems dying instantly. "Admiral," Rodriguez interrupted again. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, especially when dealing with an enemy that expects everything to be new. She turned to her weapons officer. Load the tungsten rounds. Let's see how their fancy tech holds up against some good old-fashioned physics. The enemy fleet was closing fast now, their impossible geometries becoming clearer. Rodriguez could feel the tension on her bridge, but it was the good kind. The focused anticipation of a crew that knew their jobs and their ship. All hands, she announced shipwide. This is the captain. We're about to engage an unknown enemy with capabilities we've never seen before. They've already taken down ships far more advanced than ours. She paused, letting that sink in. Fortunately for us, we humans never got around to putting all our eggs in the digital basket. Every system on this ship has a backup. Every computer has a manual override. And every one of you knows how to do your job, even if every fancy piece of tech we have goes dark. That's not a weakness. Today, it's our strength. The enemy ships were close enough now that their weapons were beginning to reach out toward the Stormbreaker, where their beams touched the ship's hull. The electromagnetic shielding sparked and flared. Shield holding, Wells reported. Whatever they're using, it's not getting through our EM defenses. Rodriguez allowed herself a tight smile. As expected, their weapons are designed to attack complex digital systems, but you can't hack a magnetic field. She leaned forward in her chair. All weapons, prepare to fire. Let's show our new friends the difference between elegant complexity and brutal simplicity. Mr. Chen, target the nearest vessel. Time to remind the galaxy that sometimes the old ways still work just fine. The Stormbreaker's railguns, massive electromagnetic accelerators that fired solid tungsten rounds at a significant fraction of light speed, began to spin up. Their power was drawn directly from the ship's reactors, bypassing the digital power distribution network entirely. As the enemy ships moved to surround them, Rodriguez felt a fierce pride in her vessel and her crew. The Gentai might see them as primitives playing with technology they barely understood, but sometimes survival wasn't about having the most advanced systems. Sometimes it was about knowing when to take a step backward to move forward. All batteries, she commanded. Fire. The space around the Stormbreaker lit up as the railguns unleashed their fury, sending hypervelocity rounds screaming toward their targets. The enemy vessels, for all their dimensional strangeness and advanced technology, proved to be surprisingly vulnerable to chunks of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The battle for humanity's first major interstellar war had begun, and it would be fought not with quantum computers and artificial intelligence, but with steel and steam and human ingenuity. Behind her, Rodriguez heard Admiral Venzar's voice, tinged with something that might have been hope. Perhaps we have something to learn from your primitive ways after all. Rodriguez didn't respond. She was too busy proving that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to blend the old with the new, the simple with the complex, and to never, ever give up on either. The real question now was, would it be enough? The logic of chaos. The holographic display in the Stormbreaker's tactical room showed the aftermath of their first engagement. 3 enemy vessels reduced to expanding clouds of debris. 2 more retreating to the edge of the system, their geometric forms somehow distorted, as if partially phased out of normal space. Captain Rodriguez stood with Admiral Venzar, whose crystalline form projected directly from a secure quantum transmitter. The Gentai leader had insisted on this meeting after witnessing the Stormbreaker's unexpected success against what they now knew to be called the Void Collective. Fascinating, Venzar's translated voice hummed through the room. Your targeting systems shouldn't have been able to achieve such accuracy with purely mechanical weapons. The computational requirements alone. That's where you're wrong, Admiral. Rodriguez interrupted, gesturing to Chief Engineer Marcus Santos, who stood ready with his presentation. We don't use purely computational targeting. Show him, Marcus. Santos stepped forward, his dark eyes gleaming with the pride of someone about to reveal a particularly clever trick. He waved his hand, and the holographic display shifted to show the Stormbreaker's hybrid targeting system. The Void Collective's primary advantage, Santos explained, is their ability to disrupt complex digital systems. They essentially inject quantum noise that cascades through any pure computational network, creating a domino effect of system failures. But the display zoomed in on what looked like an antiquated mechanical computer, merged seamlessly with modern quantum processors. We use a hybrid approach. The mechanical components provide a baseline targeting solution using simple physics, basically glorified trigonometry. The quantum systems then refine that solution, but they're not essential to the system's basic function. Venzar's crystalline form flickered with patterns that Rodriguez had learned to recognize as intense interest. But such a system would be horrifically inefficient. The processing lag alone would be approximately 2.3 microseconds, Santos finished, which is exactly what makes it effective against the Collective. They expect instant responses, perfect calculations. Our system introduces just enough chaos, just enough imperfection, to make our actions unpredictable. Rodriguez watched as understanding rippled through the Admiral's crystalline patterns. The Gentai had pursued perfect digital efficiency for so long they'd forgotten one of the fundamental rules of warfare: predictability equals vulnerability. Lieutenant Chen, Rodriguez called. Show the Admiral the analysis of the Collective's attack pattern. Chen's fingers danced across his hybrid interface, bringing up a new display. The Collected ships move in mathematically perfect formations. Their attacks follow optimal targeting solutions. They're running everything through pure logic engines. He grinned, which means they have absolutely no idea what to do with this. The display showed the Stormbreaker's seemingly erratic maneuvers during the battle, a pattern that looked random but actually followed what humans had long ago named controlled chaos theory. We introduced deliberate imperfections into our movement patterns, Rodriguez explained. Small delays, slight deviations from optimal courses. To your systems, it looks like inefficiency. To the Collective, it's mathematical noise that their prediction algorithms can't process. But surely such inefficiencies leave you vulnerable, Venzar protested. Commander Wells stepped forward. Actually, Admiral, they make us stronger. Every human crew member knows how to operate their systems manually if needed. Our inefficient hybrid approach means we can lose half our computer systems and still fight effectively. Can your ships say the same? The Admiral's silence was answer enough. There's more, Santos added, bringing up new diagrams. We've been analyzing the Collective's system-killing weapon. It works by creating a cascading quantum interference pattern, essentially a virus that spreads through pure digital networks. But our hybrid systems create natural breakpoints that stop the cascade. Rodriguez watched as the implications hit home for the Admiral. The Gentai's pursuit of pure digital perfection had left them vulnerable to an enemy that used that very perfection against them. Humanity's primitive approach of combining old and new technologies had accidentally created the perfect defense against the Collective's primary weapon. We've already begun adapting our remaining ships, Venzar said after a long moment, converting them to hybrid systems based on your designs. But the process is slow, and our crews, the Admiral's form flickered with what might have been embarrassment. We have become perhaps too reliant on pure digital interfaces. The concept of manual control is alien to us. Rodriguez smiled. Then it's a good thing you have us to teach you. She turned to Santos. Chief, how quickly can we set up a training program for Gentai crews? Already working on it, Captain. We're converting Cargo Bay 3 into a simulation center. Old school controls, hybrid interfaces, the works. Figure we can start with the basics: manual helm control, analog targeting, physical emergency procedures. Good. Rodriguez turned back to the Admiral. We'll need to move quickly. The Collective will adapt to our current tactics. They may not understand chaos, but they can learn from failure. As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. The collective ships that had retreated earlier were returning, and they weren't alone. Dozens of geometric forms were phasing into normal space, their impossible shapes somehow even more wrong than before. "They're already adapting," Chen reported, studying his readings. "Energy signatures are different. It's like they're trying to generate their own controlled chaos, mimicking our patterns." Rodriguez felt a fierce grin spread across her face. "Good. Let them try. There's one thing about chaos theory they haven't figured out yet." She turned to her crew. "You can't just reproduce chaos. You have to embrace it. Sound battle stations. Let's show them what human unpredictability really looks like." As klaxons began to sound throughout the ship, Rodriguez saw something she never expected. Admiral Venzar's crystalline form was pulsing with what could only be described as enthusiasm. "Perhaps," the Admiral said, "it is time for the Gentai to embrace a little chaos of our own." The upcoming battle would test not just their weapons and shields, but the very philosophy that separated human technology from that of their allies and enemies. As Rodriguez took her position on the bridge, she knew they were fighting for more than survival now. They were fighting to prove that sometimes the best way forward was to step back, that perfection could be a weakness, and that the greatest strength lay not in pure advancement, but in the messy, chaotic, beautiful combination of old and new. The real chaos was about to begin. Retrograde advance. The Stormbreaker's cargo bay looked like a museum of technological evolution. Retired control panels salvaged from decommissioned ships lined the walls. Mechanical gauges and analog displays sat next to holographic interfaces. Chief Engineer Santos stood in the center of it all, watching as Gentai crew members attempted to navigate this jungle of primitive technology. "No," Santos called out to a frustrated Gentai navigator whose crystalline form was flickering with confusion. "Don't try to interface with it directly. Use your hands. Feel the resistance in the controls." "That's not a bug. It's a feature." Captain Rodriguez watched from the observation deck above, Admiral Venzar's holographic form beside her. In the 3 days since their first engagement with the Void Collective, they'd been racing against time to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. "Your people are struggling," Rodriguez observed. "We have relied on direct neural interfaces for so long," Venzar admitted. "The concept of physical control is challenging. Yet, I cannot deny the results." The Admiral's form shifted to indicate the tactical display, where red dots represented the approaching collective fleet. "They are already adapting to our first encounter, but not in the way we expected." The display showed the enemy fleet's new formations, no longer geometrically perfect, but instead attempting to mimic the controlled chaos of human battle tactics. Their movements were jerky, artificial, like a computer's impression of randomness. "They're trying to copy our unpredictability," Commander Wells noted as she joined them. "But they're doing it wrong. They're applying mathematical formulas to generate pseudo-random patterns, which makes them even more predictable," Rodriguez finished. "Any decent chaos theorist could spot the underlying algorithms." She turned to Wells. "How are the modifications to the fleet coming along?" 6 Gentai cruisers have been successfully converted to hybrid systems. We've installed manual overrides, analog backups, and physical control interfaces. They're not pretty, but they'll work." A sudden commotion from below drew their attention. One of the Gentai trainees had actually managed to complete a perfect manual docking procedure simulation, their crystalline form glowing with pride. "They're learning faster than expected," Santos called up. "Turns out once they stop trying to calculate everything and start feeling it, they're natural pilots." Rodriguez nodded, but before she could respond, the tactical alert began blaring. Lieutenant Chen's voice came over the comm. "Captain to the bridge." Multiple collective signatures detected entering the system. "They're different." Minutes later, Rodriguez stood on her bridge, watching as the enemy fleet emerged from quantum space. The collective ships had changed. Their impossible geometries now incorporated organic elements, tendrils of living metal writhing across their hulls. "They're adapting," Chen reported, his hands dancing across his hybrid interface. "Energy readings suggest they've incorporated biological components into their systems. They're trying to replicate our hybrid approach. But they don't understand what makes it work," Wells added. "They think it's just about combining different types of technology. They don't get that it's about the interaction between machine precision and organic intuition." Rodriguez studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The collective had observed humanity's success and tried to replicate it, but in doing so, they'd revealed something crucial about themselves. "They can only think in binaries," she said slowly. "As ready as they can be, Captain. Though I must admit, sending my finest crews into battle with these manual controls goes against every instinct I possess." Rodriguez smiled. "Sometimes the best defense is to embrace what your enemy thinks is a weakness." She keyed the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, this is Captain Rodriguez. The enemy has studied our tactics and tried to adapt. They've incorporated chaos into their systems, added organic components to their ships. They think they've figured out our advantage." She paused, letting that sink in. "But they're missing the point. Our strength isn't in our technology. It's in our ability to use whatever works, regardless of whether it's old or new, simple or complex. They see our hybrid systems as inefficient. We know that inefficiency is what makes us unpredictable, and unpredictability is what keeps us alive." The enemy fleet was spreading out now, their new organic components writhing as they prepared to attack. Rodriguez felt a fierce pride as she watched both human and Gentai ships move to meet them, their formations looking ragged and imperfect to digital analysis, but containing a deeper pattern that only organic minds could truly appreciate. "All ships, execute Battle Plan Delta," she commanded. "But remember, the plan is just a framework. Trust your instincts. Be unpredictable. Let chaos be your ally." The space between the fleets lit up as the battle began. The collective ships launched their attack with mechanical precision, even their attempts at randomness following predictable patterns. The combined human-Gentai fleet responded with true chaos, each ship acting independently while somehow maintaining an organic cohesion that no algorithm could predict. On the Stormbreaker's bridge, Rodriguez watched as her crew demonstrated everything they'd been teaching the Gentai. Chen's fingers flew across both holographic displays and physical controls, switching between systems seamlessly. Wells called out tactical adjustments based on both computer analysis and gut instinct. And through it all, the ship moved like a living thing, its responses neither purely digital nor purely analog, but a perfect fusion of both. The collective ships, for all their attempts to adapt, couldn't match this level of integration. Their organic components fought against their digital cores, creating gaps in their defenses that Rodriguez's fleet was quick to exploit. "They're trying to calculate chaos," Wells observed as another enemy vessel succumbed to their attack. "They don't understand that true chaos can't be calculated. It has to be lived." Rodriguez nodded, watching as a Gentai cruiser, now piloted by hands on physical controls rather than pure computer guidance, executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for either pure digital or pure analog systems. The Gentai were learning, adapting in a way the collective couldn't match. "Send to all ships," she ordered. "Push the attack. Show them what true hybrid warfare looks like." As the battle raged on, Rodriguez couldn't help but smile at the irony. The Void Collective had forced the most advanced civilization in known space to take a technological step backward, only to discover that sometimes moving backward was the best way to move forward. The real question was, how would the collective respond to this lesson in the true nature of chaos? Silicon and Sol. The Stormbreaker's engineering lab had transformed into something that would have given any traditional engineer nightmares. Crystalline Gentai technology merged with human hybrid systems in ways that defied conventional design philosophy. Chief Engineer Santos stood at the center of the controlled chaos, his hands deep in what appeared to be a living computer core. "It shouldn't work," he muttered, not for the first time. By every known principle of computational engineering, this combination of systems should tear itself apart. Next to him, the Gentai engineer Telshan's crystalline form pulsed with what had become recognizable as amusement. Perhaps that is why it does work, my friend. We have moved beyond known principles. Captain Rodriguez watched from the doorway as the two engineers continued their work. The past week had seen 3 more engagements with the Void Collective, each one harder than the last. The enemy was learning, adapting, pushing their hybrid technology to new limits, but they were still missing something crucial, something that Santos and Telshan might have just figured out. "Report," she called, stepping into the lab. Santos straightened up, wiping his hands on his already stained uniform. "We've done it, Captain. Or at least we think we have. Show her, telephone." The Gentai engineer interfaced with a nearby console, and a holographic display sprang to life, showing what looked like a 3-dimensional circuit diagram merged with a living organism. "We call it the neural crystal matrix," Telshan explained, his translated voice humming with excitement. "It combines Gentai crystalline computing with human neural interface technology and analog systems. But the key isn't in the technology itself, it's in how it learns. The collective's been trying to replicate our hybrid systems," Santos picked up, "but they're approaching it like an engineering problem. Plug A into socket B, combine system X with program Y. What we've created here isn't just a combination of technologies. It's a genuine fusion." Rodriguez studied the display, noting how the patterns seemed to shift and flow of their own accord. "You've made it alive." "Not exactly." Telshan's form flickered thoughtfully. "We've made it responsive. The crystal matrix adapts like our biological systems, the neural interface learns like your human minds, and the analog components provide a stable foundation that can't be disrupted by the collective's weapons. But here's the beautiful part," Santos added, bringing up another display. "It doesn't just learn, it unlearns, constantly breaking down and rebuilding its own connections, never settling into patterns that the collective could predict and exploit." Rodriguez felt a smile spreading across her face as she understood the implications. "You've built controlled chaos into the very architecture of the system." "Exactly," both engineers exclaimed simultaneously, causing them to exchange surprised looks. Before they could continue, the tactical alert began blaring. Lieutenant Chen's voice came over the comm. "Captain, to the bridge. Multiple collective signatures detected. Biggest fleet we've seen yet." Minutes later, Rodriguez stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The collective fleet was massive, easily 3 times the size of their previous attacks. But it was their configuration that drew her attention. "They've completely redesigned their ships," Wells reported, studying the sensor data. "Full integration of organic and mechanical components. They're not just mimicking our hybrid approach anymore. They've evolved it." The enemy vessels no longer showed their trademark geometric patterns. Instead, they seemed to flow and shift, their forms constantly changing like liquid metal given life. Their movements were more organic, less predictable. "They're learning," Rodriguez murmured. Then, louder, "Get me Admiral Venzar." The Admiral's hologram appeared moments later, its crystalline patterns showing clear concern. "We see them, Captain. Our analysis suggests they've achieved a level of technological integration that should be impossible." "Should be," Rodriguez agreed, "by conventional standards. But we're long past conventional, aren't we?" She turned to Santos, who had followed her to the bridge. "How soon can we implement the neural crystal matrix?" "The prototype is ready for the Stormbreaker systems. We can have it integrated within 2 hours." "But the rest of the fleet? We'll have to fight without it for now. Rodriguez finished. She turned back to Venzar. Admiral, we need time. Can your fleet hold them off while we complete the integration? The Admiral's form pulsed with determination. My crews have learned well from your lessons, Captain. We will give you the time you need. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. While the Gentai fleet engaged the collective in a series of hit-and-run attacks, Santos and Telshan worked frantically to integrate their new system into the Stormbreaker's core. Rodriguez paced the bridge, watching as the battle unfolded. The collective's new ships were devastating. Their evolved hybrid technology allowed them to adapt almost instantly to any tactic the defenders employed. One by one, the outer defensive lines began to fall back. Integration at 95%. Santos reported from engineering. But Captain, there's something you need to know. The neural crystal matrix, it needs a primary consciousness to function properly. A mind to guide its chaos. Rodriguez understood immediately. It needs a captain. Not just any captain, Telshan added. Santos and Telshan exchanged looks. We've modified your command chair, Santos explained. When the matrix goes online, you'll need to, well, become one with the ship. Not like the Gentai neural interfaces or our standard systems. This will be deeper. The ship won't just respond to your commands. It will respond to your intuition. Rodriguez settled into her command chair, feeling the subtle hum of new technology beneath her fingers. Do it. As Santos initiated the integration sequence, Rodriguez felt the ship's system slowly connecting with her consciousness. It was unlike anything she'd experienced before. Not the pure digital interface of Gentai technology, nor the standard neural links of human ships. This was something new, something that existed in the space between order and chaos. Through her new awareness, she could feel the collective fleet approaching, their evolved hybrid ships moving with terrible purpose. But she could also feel something else, the true potential of human and Gentai technology working in perfect harmony, guided by a consciousness that understood the value of imperfection. All hands, she called, her voice resonating through both the physical ship and its digital systems. Prepare for battle. Let's show the collective what true integration looks like. The real test of their new technology was about to begin, and with it, perhaps the key to defeating an enemy that had finally learned to adapt, but still hadn't learned to truly understand. Tomorrow's